Senator Sanders is with us. We're going to do Brunch with Bernie on, is it Wednesday? It's Wednesday. Yes, on Wednesday. Senator Sanders, welcome.
Great to be with you, Tom.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And just, to all of our listeners and viewers, we'll ask Bernie how everything's going on in the world, and then we'll be taking your calls.
People should not get confused. You have to go to work tomorrow. Today is Wednesday. It's not Friday.
That's right.
And last Friday, I couldn't be on the show because I was in South Carolina, and then we went to North Carolina, and then we went to Minnesota, and I had a great trip. And on that trip, Tom, it just reinforced to me that this business of red state, blue state is not really the reality in America today. You got good people, you have progressive people, you have working class people who understand that government can and must start working for ordinary people rather than the millionaire and billionaire class. And we had an opportunity to meet with many of them in South Carolina and North Carolina. So it was a good trip.
That's great. That's great.
As many listeners may know, just an hour or so ago, we had a vote here on raising the minimum wage at a time when we have more people living in poverty than at any time in American history, over 46 million, at a time when the minimum wage has not kept pace with inflation and is today a starvation wage of $7.25 an hour. What we proposed, and I think it was a modest proposal, was raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. And sadly enough, we could not get one Republican to support that modest piece of legislation. And I think we ended up with 54 votes, but in the Senate, when the Republicans filibuster, we need 60 votes, and we didn't reach that. But we're not going to give up on this, Tom. I think if we raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, over 20 million people would be taken out of poverty. And while $10.10 is certainly nothing to write home about, it's a lot better than $7.25 an hour. So we're going to keep that fight in a time when so many of the new jobs that are being created are part-time and low-wage jobs. We have to raise the minimum wage. I think $10.10 is a modest start. I would like to go further than that. But what we have to do as a nation now is put pressure on Republicans and say, sorry, what the world is about is not just tax breaks for billionaires and millionaires and large corporations. What the real world is about is that we have millions of families who are struggling to put bread on the table, to put gas in the car, and they need some help. And yes, they may not make huge campaign contributions. They're not the Koch brothers. They're not going to contribute tens of thousands of dollars into some political party or a campaign. They are human beings, and many of them are hurting, and we've got to raise the minimum wage. So that fight continues, and the effort now is to start winning some Republican support for it. Yeah. In terms of health care, we're making some success after the disastrous rollout of the Affordable Care website. It turns out that over 8 million people have gotten onto the exchange, more than had been anticipated. Millions more are going to get health insurance because their kids are going to take advantage of their parents' program, and millions more are going to be able to see an expansion of Medicaid. And while a lot of attention has been focused on the very poor rollout of the Affordable Care Act, which is certainly worth commenting on, what has not been discussed enough is the fact that we have over 20 Republican states in this country who, when the federal government expanded Medicaid, 100% costs will be picked up by the federal government. These states said, yes, we have hundreds of thousands of working class people who can't afford health insurance. Yes, thank you, the federal government providing 100% of the costs for the next 3 years and 90% after that. But no, we're not going to take advantage of that because of ideological and political reasons. We believe in private health insurance. We do not believe in the Affordable Care Act, and therefore we're going to deny health care to millions and millions of people. And there are studies out there that will tell you that people are going to die, obviously, because they don't have access to health care. People who are going to end up a lot sicker than they otherwise should be because they're not able to get into a doctor with the Medicaid. And I think that is just reprehensible. And I think we need to put pressure on every one of those governors, every one of those legislatures, and say, you know what? You just can't turn your back on working people because they don't make large campaign contributions. They're not the powerful movers and shakers in your state. So we've got to work on that issue. I just held a hearing this morning as chairman of the Veterans Committee, and it was a very interesting hearing. And the VA is actually doing a very good job, better than I think most other healthcare systems, in trying to move toward a complementary and alternative healthcare. By that I mean acupuncture, massage therapy, yoga, meditation, and therapies that can help people without over-medicating them. One of the very serious health problems we have in this country is we have a lot of over-medication. People are becoming addicted to opiates, and sometimes that translates into getting involved in heroin and addicting to that and all kinds of bad stuff. So what you're seeing, interestingly enough, in the VA and in the Department of Defense is if you walk into those hospitals, what you're going to find out that their patients are being given the opportunity to get involved in complementary and alternative medicine. And I applaud both the VA and the DOD for that. I think I've held town meetings on that issue in Vermont over the years. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people showing up because I think people understand that there's obviously a very important role for pharmaceuticals to play in our treatment. They save lives every single day. But that healthcare is more than just taking medication, that there are approaches toward wellness, there are approaches toward disease prevention, and there are ways to try to unite mind and body to make us healthier and stronger. And I applaud the VA and the DOD for doing that. I wanted to mention something also, Tom, if I might. There was a piece in the Washington Post the other day pointing out that my website, sanders.senate.gov, our Facebook page, has more people who are quote-unquote talking about us than anybody else in the United States Congress. We had over 280,000 people who are actively involved in discussing the important issues facing our country. And I want to thank all of those people and urge other people to get involved in that discussion. I think you and I know, Tom, that the corporate media very often does not provide the issues, provide the information that we need on the most important issues facing this country. We try to do that on our website, and we try to promote really good discussion amongst all of our people. So people who are interested in participating in the Facebook discussion, go to our website, sanders.senate.gov, and you can join many hundreds of thousands of other people who are involved in discussion. Last point that I would make is I think there is more and more understanding of the disastrous role that Citizens United has played in allowing billionaires to control our political process, and you're going to see a lot of activity in trying to overturn that disastrous Supreme Court decision through a constitutional amendment.
That's marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. Senator Sanders is with us. It's Wednesday, but we're doing a live brunch with Bernie because I'm going to be on the road the next couple of days. So, and thank you, Senator, for that. And so we'll be back with your questions for Bernie right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website at sanders.senate.gov. And welcome back. Dave in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You are on, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Satellite Network. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, hi, Tom and Bernie. My question is, Tom mentioned last week that a tariff of 30% on imports would be great. And he also mentioned a couple weeks earlier that a value-added tax where each import is taxed at each stage would be good. So my question is, what's the difference between a value-added tax and a tariff? And I'll take my answer offline.
Okay, Dave, I'll let Tom give you the details on it, but let me just say this. When we talk about the collapse of the American middle class, what we are talking about, among many other things, is the fact that in the last 13 or 14 years, we have lost some 50,000 manufacturing plants in America, 50,000 and millions of decent paying jobs. Not all of those jobs have been lost because of trade agreements. Some of them, folded for a number of other reasons. But a lot of them were lost because of these disastrous trade agreements like NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, that were pushed upon the Congress by the multinational corporations and the National Association of Manufacturers and the Chamber of Commerce and all of the big money interests. And what people like Jack Welch, the former chairman of General Electric, what he said at the time, he said, look, I would want my manufacturing plant to be on a barge. Ideally, it would be on a barge so that I could take it to the lowest wage countries in the world. And that's certainly the direction that American manufacturing has gone. And it is not just blue-collar jobs that have gone to China or Mexico or elsewhere. It is white-collar jobs that are going to India and Russia and elsewhere as well, where people work for lower wages than we do in the United States of America. So what you have seen is, A, the loss of millions of good-paying jobs, and B, a race to the bottom, a downward pressure on wages, so that instead of seeing an increase in wages because of increased productivity, you're seeing a decrease in wages because American workers are now forced to compete against desperate people all over the world. Bottom line there is, A, we need to change our trade policies, and B, we have got to tell the General Electrics of the world, and by the way, GE, as I understand it, has not paid federal income tax in this country in the last 5 years because of all the tax loopholes that are out there. But it's not just GE, it's all of these major corporations. They have got to reinvest in America. They want us to buy their products. They're advertising every day on TV, buy this, buy that. Well, if they want us to buy their products, they've got to stop manufacturing their products in this country.
Yeah. Just 15 seconds, Senator. You think that SHAFTA, the Southern Hemisphere Asian, the TPP, chances?
Well, as of now, Senator Harry Reid did the right thing. And he said, no, I'm not going to bring that bill before the Senate. We're certainly not going to fast track it. So as of this moment, that bill is going nowhere in a hurry. And I think that's appropriate. I think it's a bad piece of legislation for a number of reasons.
Good. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. We'll be back with more of Senator Sanders in our Brunch with Bernie National Town Hall meeting on Wednesday, 2 days early. Yes, we are live right now talking with Senator Sanders. So feel free to call in if you have a question for the Senator. We'll be back with more of your calls with Senator Sanders right after this. Welcome back to Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. We're doing Brunch with Bernie 2 days early. It's Wednesday. We're live on the air on Wednesday because tomorrow I'm going to be in Seattle. The day after I'll be in Portland. And Bernie was kind enough to come in today to do our National Town Hall meeting, taking your calls. Tony in Piercy, California, you are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Tom. Thank you for everything you do. I wanted to ask Senator Sanders, I would like to know if you know whether or not the state or the government will still attach liens to your possessions after the age of 55 with the Affordable Care Act like they did before the Affordable Care Act was enacted.
Liens on your property.
Yeah, if there's a thing in Medicaid where if you're over 55 and you go into and you have certain kinds of medical care, like when my mother almost went into long-term nursing care, you have to qualify for Medicaid. You have to exhaust your resources, and then the government can recover some of that from your estate.
Well, the answer is that the long-term solution of health care in America, Tony, is for the United States to do what the rest of the industrialized world does, and that is provide a national health care program guaranteeing health care to all people, regardless of income. We don't have that right now. You have a Medicare program for the elderly. You have a Medicaid program for low-income people. In order to qualify for Medicaid, you've got to be low income. Among other things, you can't have very much money in the bank or very much in the way of assets. So I'm not quite sure of the detail that Tom raised, but to qualify, You have got to have no limited assets. And what I guess Thom is saying here is that if you undergo expensive procedures, then after your death, those assets are sold and repaid to the government?
Yeah, it's. I don't quite understand the whole thing, Senator.
I don't either, to be honest with you, but that's kind of what the situation is.
Yeah, and it's a remnant, really, a pre-Obamacare remnant from the way Medicaid was structured.
But let me just repeat this point.
Sure.
And one of the debates, I voted for the Affordable Care Act. I think it is making some modest improvements. It is providing health insurance through the exchanges to some 8 million people and helping other people. But at the end of the day, the debate that we as a nation have got to have, should health care be a right of all people, regardless of income, or shouldn't it be? And if it is, the logical conclusion is you move to a Medicare for all single-payer system, and I've introduced legislation to do just that. And then you don't have situations like what Tony just talked about, because healthcare then becomes a right. It is government funded through a progressive tax source. Everybody gets it.
Ashes in Chicago, listening to WCPT. You're on the air, Senator Sanders.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Senator Sanders, for taking my call. My question is, under a single-payer system, do the patients or people have to search for a doctor that's in-network? So do they have to ask the doctor, do they take this insurance? Under a single-payer system, isn't it true that we don't have to look for a doctor that's in the network?
That is correct. I mean, in the legislation that I have written and in what exists in Canada, you go to the doctor that you want to go to, period. That's about it.
Okay. John in San Francisco, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders and Tom. Thank you for taking my call. Since the Republican Party seems to think there's a problem with gerrymandering and elections and fraud and everything, is there any way we could set up a national election, get the day off, have the national elections, and basically let the people decide what's going to be moving forward in measurements? Because apparently the politicians, and not you included, but have not been able to do their jobs and to get things done. So is there any way we can get a national system, since the Republicans seem to think there's a big fraud problem in elections?
Well, I think that's an interesting idea, John, but obviously the Republican Party, which is very supportive of legislation to make it easier for the wealthy to buy elections. They pushed very much for Citizens United and McCutcheon. They want to go further. Republicans now, in terms of campaign finance, want to eliminate all restrictions on campaign spending, which means that the Koch brothers could write checks, multi-million-dollar checks to every candidate in the country directly. Right now, they have to do it independently. But furthermore, as you've indicated, what Republican states are doing in an unprecedented way, gerrymandering is not a new idea. It's going on forever. Parties in control try to create districts that work for them politically. But the Republicans have taken it to an entirely new level. I just learned, I should have known this, Tom, that in North Carolina, where, as I understand it, the Republicans control their governor's office and their House and their Senate, and I think they have, a significant majority of their members of Congress. In the last election, as I was told, 51% of the votes went to the Democrats and 49% to the Republicans.
Right.
But those votes are nullified because you create certain types of districts which work for the Republicans.
Yeah, it's the same thing in Michigan.
So the Republicans have been extremely outrageous in terms of manipulating districts to benefit themselves. Do I think we should take a look at this at a national level and figure out a way that you have reasonable districts, districts that conform to geography and to logic, rather than convoluted districts which benefit a political party? I do think so. But I think what it is clear is the Republicans cannot win on their ideas. Most people in this country do not support giving tax breaks to billionaires and cutting back on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education. They don't support that. So what the Republicans have to do to win is to make sure they buy elections with the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson. Second of all, they have to do a lot of gerrymandering to make sure they get the districts they need. And third of all, they got to engage in voter suppression, making it harder for low-income people and elderly people to vote. That's how they win elections.
Yeah, tragically. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour on Wednesday of this week. And with many thanks, much appreciation to Senator Sanders for dropping in on Wednesday, since I'm going to be on the road on Thursday and Friday. We will have live programs. Sam Cedar filling in tomorrow, and Leslie Marshall filling in tomorrow and Friday. But it's Brunch with Bernie right now. We'll be right back with Senator Sanders.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov, and there are links there to his Facebook page also, which is a pretty amazing place to visit. And welcome back to our program. It's Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour, our National Town Hall meeting 2 days early on Wednesday, live with Senator Sanders. Since I'm going to be on the road on Thursday and Friday, the senator was kind enough to come in today. You're still here, Senator?
I am right here.
Okay, great. Joe in Marietta, Georgia, you are on the air with Senator Sanders. Joe? Uh-oh. We just had a...
Gentlemen.
Oh, good. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, excellent. Senator Sanders, let me congratulate you on a great career. I'm sure you hear that all the time, but I appreciate who you are very much. However, I don't have nearly as much confidence in the rest of the men and women that serve with you in Congress, and the majority of the rest. I think that you are an exception and not the rule. Therefore, I wanted to know what your feeling is concerning publicly funded elections in this country, as far as like the probability that could happen in a generation or two. Do you think that it would be a solution? And then how do you feel about term limits?
Okay, Joe, thanks for your question, and thanks for your support and your comments. I think, in a broad sense, we need a political revolution in this country. What does that mean? What it means is we need to, raise political consciousness. In this coming election in 2014, the estimate is that some 60% of the people will not vote, Joe. So we're a democracy. We tout ourselves as a democracy. 60% of the people, it is estimated, will not vote. 40% will vote. And in terms of influencing the 40%, you have the Koch brothers and other folks spending huge, huge amounts of money. You have other efforts to limit people participating in the political process. That's not really the kind of democracy that I think you and I and most Americans see and believe this country should be. One of the reasons that people are so profoundly disgusted with the political system, and one of the reasons in point the fact that most members of Congress do not stand up and fight for ordinary people, is the influence of money in the political process. So it is not just that the Koch brothers and others are going to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into supporting candidates who are working day and night against the working class and the middle class of this country. It's that the people on the other side have also got to worry, and they got to go out and raise all kinds of money as well. So you have a system which is dominated by big money, which forces every single member of Congress, or virtually every member, to spend half their lives, morning, noon, and night, raising money in order to compete. It is an awful system. It needs to change. And what we need are elections where candidates can talk about their ideas and their vision for the country, rather than spend their lives raising money mostly from rich people and large corporations. To my mind, to answer your questions, public funding of elections is exactly the right thing to do. It's a complicated issue, it's not a magical formula. But what we are saying by public funding is that if somebody can demonstrate a certain level of support, say they can get a $5 or a $10 contribution from X number of people to show that they're not some kind of, joke, that they have a certain level of support for their ideas, then the public treasury contributes the rest, and there are limits about what can be spent. People can get on television to talk about the issues rather than flooding the airway with 30-second sound bites and TV ads. So I think if we're serious about reforming our election system, it's campaign finance reform, certainly, and included in campaign finance reform must be public funding of elections.
Bob in Crystal Lake, Illinois, listening to WCPT. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hey, Mr. Sanders and Mr. Hartman, thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
I have a question regarding minimum wage and the health care. Stand behind both 100%. If I wanted it my way, it'd be single payer and probably raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. However, with it being subsidized, the health care plans that we have now and the minimum wage that we have now, raising it to 10.10 and raising those people out of poverty, would that negate the subsidies that they would get and then hurt enrollment in the health care?
Would people whose income go up lose their ability to get into the Affordable Care Act is the question. It's a good question, and I can't give you the answer to that. What I do know is that according to the studies that I have seen, Bob, raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour would take about 25 million people out of poverty. I suspect that even $10.10 is such a low wage that people would still be eligible for Medicaid and still be eligible for the exchanges. So I think it probably will not have an impact.
Yeah,
on people's.
We've had actually, Bernie, we had an expert on about this a while ago who said that it may move some people out of eligibility for free Medicaid and into eligibility for 100% subsidy on the exchange. So they still pay nothing.
So people would be juggled a little bit, but
that's
I
right.
think the wages, we're still talking about such low wages.
Right, because there's still, because the Obamacare covers up to 200% of poverty or something like that, whatever the numbers are. So, yeah. Let's see here. Mike in Fresno, California. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. I'm concerned about what I see as an attack on residential solar. I'm here in California, and I can't put a system any larger than my consumption. And that means I'm only going to use maybe a third of my roof or half. And in California, you can't get paid if you overproduce. And what are your thoughts? Is there anything that can be done on the federal level?
Well, I suspect that is a state decision, Mike. But I am the sponsor, the introducer of a bill called 10 million solar rooftops, which means that I think we should significantly incentivize solar. I think what we are seeing in recent years is the price of photovoltaic panels going down, and the more we use, the more it is going to go down. And I think that it is terribly imperative that this nation lead the world in dealing with the crisis of climate change. The scientists have been very, very clear that if we don't get our act together and we don't substantially cut back on greenhouse gas emissions, what we're going to see is more temperature rising in the oceans and on the land. We're going to see more flooding. We're going to see more drought. We're going to see more extreme weather conditions. We're going to see rising sea levels. And we're going to see real devastation. We're seeing it now. It'll only get worse. So I think that the federal government, in every way that it can, in terms of subsidizing and investing in solar, in wind, in geothermal, in heat pumps, in biomass, and other technologies, we have got to lead the world. And when we do that, we're going to save money for individuals on their fuel bills. When we move aggressively to energy efficiency, you're going to see really good things happening. And we're also going to create millions of jobs. So I think creating jobs, saving people money on their fuel bills, and cutting greenhouse gas emissions is pretty much of a win-win-win. So I believe we should do everything that we can, Mike, to expand solar both on rooftops and in utility scale.
Grant in Penfield, New York. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
This is Grant Langdon, and I was wondering if you would back a constitutional amendment that would bar people from donating to any candidate that they could not vote for.
Well, Grant, that's not exactly the way I would approach campaign finance reform. In a lot of ways that you could approach it. I think, number one, we have to end the absurdity of Citizens United and McCutcheon and make it clear that corporations are not people and cannot spend as much money as they want in terms of under the guise of free speech in buying politicians. Number two, as I mentioned earlier, I believe in public funding of elections, which would address the issue that you are talking about, Grant. So I think we want to get to the root of the issue, and that is that we got to stop big money from buying elections. And number two, we've got to give people who don't have a lot of money or don't want to go to the rich for their campaign support a fair shot, and that means public funding of elections. That would be the direction that I would go.
Okay. Barry in Mount Prospect, Illinois. We just have a minute to the break. A quick question for the Senator, Barry?
Yes. My name is Barry, and I happen to fall through the cracks in a way where I have money in the bank, but very little interest that it generates, with the interest rates teetering around 0.9%. And yet at the same time, I've applied 2 different times for the Affordable Care Act, and they said that I would, qualify for Medicaid. I don't, because of my assets.
Right.
What can a person do when they fall between the cracks? I'm sure I'm not alone.
You are not alone. And it's not only that people like you are falling between the cracks. There are a whole lot of other people who are getting the Affordable Care Act. They are buying insurance policies, but the policies have high deductibles and high co-payments, which are also hurting them and in some cases preventing them from going to the doctor when they should. The answer, Barry, is, in my view, a national health care program, a Medicare for All single-payer program.
Very straightforward. Senator Bernie Sanders is with us. We'll be back with more of your questions for Bernie right after this. Be sure to check out his website, sanders.senate.gov. It's a great news site. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz for his newsletter there, and you can also hop over to his Facebook page from there. We'll be right back with more of Brunch with Bernie on Wednesday.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Brunch with Bernie on Wednesday. Yeah, we're live with Senator Sanders right now. We'll be right back. Sanders.senate.gov. And welcome back. Bill in Pensacola, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders and Thom Hartmann, I love you both. Senator Sanders, what kind of discussion is happening in either house about the escalation of troops around the Ukraine crisis? Or is there any? And is this going to be another slow escalation into a military conflict? Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And that's a very, very important question. Of course, there is discussion and there is great concern about the growing tension between Russia and the Ukraine. I would say that the main concern that I have is that the United States never again do what we did in Iraq, and that is get into a war virtually unilaterally. That we do not want a war with Russia, that we have to figure out a way through economic sanctions, working with the rest of the world to put enough pressure on Russia to make sure that they are not giving one thought to invading the Ukraine, and that we do everything we can through diplomatic channels to prevent this from being another war. We've had 2 wars recently, and people do not fully appreciate the impact of those wars on the men and women who served and on our finances. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan, those wars will end up costing us somewhere around $4 or $5 trillion. We lost almost 7,000 men and women in those wars, and we got several 100,000 coming home with post-traumatic stress disorder and TBI. The cost of war is enormously high, and I do not look favorably on those guys who are always talking about how strong we have to be and military. Those wars have cost us very, very dearly in human, and what's happened to people and what's happened financially. So we've got to work with the rest of the community. We've got to work our way through this thing. But the last thing in the world we want is a war.
Jim in Meridian, Mississippi. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes, Senator Sanders, it's a pleasure to talk with you today. I'm retired military, and I would just like to know when the Major Nidal Hassan in Fort Hood, Texas, will be executed. He was sentenced to death 4 years after he committed that horrible act of killing 13 American soldiers and 1 pregnant woman. And he also received the sum of approximately $300,000 while he was waiting for trial. Can you tell me when or if he will ever be executed?
Well, Jim, I can't. I don't know the answer to that, and that's a decision that will be made by folks who are not in the United States Congress. But you're absolutely right. What this guy did was reprehensible, unimaginable that he would turn his guns on his fellow soldiers and do what he did. And he will be, well, all I can say is that my hope is that he is punished. I'm not a great fan of the death penalty, and we'll see what happens. But this guy deserves never to see the light of day, certainly as a free person.
And that's certainly where he is right now, is in lockdown. We will be back with Senator Bernie Sanders, our Brunch with Bernie hour on Wednesday this week, right after this. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour on Wednesday. And Charles in Opelika, Florida, you are on the air with Senator Sanders.
My pleasure to speak to both of you guys. How you doing today?
Good.
Good.
Okay, great. My question is this. Everyone in America, the populace, we don't make the same exact paycheck. Everyone has a different amount. I mean, the way the money is distributed, your paycheck, everyone is different. So why do we have this thing where money is supposed to be free speech? If money is free speech, everyone would have the same amount of have the same amount of money in the bank account, right?
Well, I understand where you're coming from, Charles. I think the decision made by the Supreme Court and Citizens United, where they equate money with free speech, is a horrendous decision and is based on very, very faulty logic. Bottom line is that the vast majority of the people in this country are going to not be spending their money on television ads. What Citizens United did is opened up the opportunity for a small number of millionaires and billionaires, a few hundred, maybe 1,000, who have huge amounts of money to essentially buy elections. And under the guise of free speech, First Amendment rights, they can now influence elections in every one of our states. And I do not believe that that is what American democracy is about. And as I mentioned earlier, Charles, our Republican colleagues want to go further. And they want to move toward the elimination of all restrictions on campaign finance so that multi-billionaires like the Koch brothers could just pay for every single campaign. They could have a whole stable of candidates. They could just hand out the checks, 20 million here, 30 million there, directly into the campaigns. That is the direction that we are heading unless we overturn Citizens United, unless we get the Supreme Court to understand that what they are doing is undermining the very foundations of our democratic society, unless we pass pass public funding of elections. We are moving, and I've said this time and time again, toward an oligarchic form of society where not only is our economy controlled by a small number of billionaires, our political life will be controlled as well. And I think that on that issue, it's not a progressive versus a conservative issue. I think that that is a concern that people all across the political spectrum have. What people understand American democracy to be is one person, one vote. Some guy's a zillionaire, somebody's poor. They both have one vote. That's called American democracy. Not giving the billionaires the ability to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in buying elections. And this is an issue of enormous consequence. But bottom line is, Charles, you're absolutely right. Buying elections is not free speech to my mind.
Marty in Encinitas, California. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Tom and Senator Sanders. Thank you for taking my call. There are many issues to be passionate about today. Two of them are, for me, Citizens United and asking Senator Sanders what I can personally do, one person in Encinitas, California, to help you run for president.
Thank you very much, Marty. We've talked about this issue of Citizens United and campaign finance reform. And I understand, I really do, that it is not, that many people don't perceive this to be a sexy issue. They're concerned about health care, they're concerned about education, they're concerned about the environment and climate change, they're concerned about veterans' rights, they're concerned about whatever it may be. There are a million issues out there. But underlying each and every one of those issues is campaign finance reform. Because if we continue down the path we are now moving, there will be a handful, and I mean a handful. The Koch brothers are worth $80 billion. Sheldon Adelson is worth some $20+ billion. And what the Supreme Court has given them is the right to buy elections, to control the United States government. They own a lot of the economy. Now they can own the government. Unless we get a handle on that, what you're going to see is support for right-wing extremists, people who, like today in the Senate, not only do not want to vote to raise the minimum wage, they want to abolish the concept of the minimum wage. People who do not want to expand Social Security or Medicare, they want to privatize it or end those programs completely. So campaign finance reform, Citizens United, is an enormous issue. I believe we will have a constitutional amendment on the floor of the Senate in the not-too-distant future. We've got to rally the American people around that amendment. Second of all, in terms of running for president, as I've indicated before, it's something that I am thinking about. And one of the factors that will influence my decision is whether or not we can have that strong grassroots movement we need to knock on millions and millions of doors with a progressive agenda. I just returned from South Carolina and North Carolina, not generally regarded as some of the most progressive states in America. But you know what? The people there do not want to cut Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. They want to make sure their kids can afford to go to college. They believe that health care is a right of citizenship. I think there are a lot of people out there in every state in this country who understand that we are moving very much in the wrong direction, who understand that big money interests have an undue influence over our economy and our political life, and want to figure out how we can create an economy that works for all people rather than just the people on top. So this is something, Marty, that I'm thinking about, and if I make that decision, love to have your support and active participation.
Senator, we just have about 30 seconds left. Thoughts for the week?
Well, the thought for the week is right now, we are in the midst of a pivotal moment in American history. And that the decision that we have got to make is whether we stand up for working families who are hurting, for a middle class which is disappearing, for the kids in this country where we have the highest rate of childhood poverty, and whether we are capable of standing up to the billionaires who have so much economic and political influence. In this country, in my view, if we got our act together, we can expand the middle class, we can provide college availability to all of our families, regardless of income. There's a lot that we can do. But to do that, we're going to have to be organized politically. We're going to have to stand up and fight.
Bernie, you're the next FDR in my mind. It is such an honor to have you on this program every week. Thank you so much for showing up today.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Senator Bernie Sanders. Be sure to check out his website, sanders.senate.gov. We'll be right back.